to the next panel on this event today. This is on energy efficiency and clean technologies and making buildings more efficient and more sustainable. We've got a great panel with us today, people with a wide range of experiences and different roles and different perspectives, so we should get some quite interesting discussion and insights on the subject. I think it goes without saying that this is something that really is high on the agenda at the moment. I think over the last 10 years, the environment, certainly since 2016, has been a growing issue for everybody in business. And just in the last year, it's had even renewed impetus with a lot of drives towards ESG and sustainability. That's driving a lot of investment and how people respond to this growing trend. So it's important to just see how that's affecting buildings, construction, real estate, and really how we develop projects in the future and how we operate our cities as well. So I'll move on to our panel and let them introduce themselves and give you a bit of an idea of what they're all about, and then we'll move into a discussion. So if I could pass over to Saeed first, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Colin. So yes, Saeed Alabbar, the CEO of AESG. So we're effectively a team of specialist consultants and engineers, really sort of working on sort of high performance environments, master plans to buildings. Our teams across the Middle East, also in London and in Singapore. We worked on a number of sort of very high performance sustainable buildings, net zero energy, net zero carbon projects as well. And as well as that role, I also sit on the board of the World Green Building Council, so quite actively involved in the sort of decarbonisation of the built environment space.
Thank you, Saeed. And Raja, you'd like to?
Thank you, Colin. My name is Raja Alameddine. I'm the CEO of Lootah Real Estate Development Company. We are, as the name implies, a developer. We are part of the Lootah Holding Group, which is a conglomerate of companies operating in the logistics, warehousing, IT, interior design, construction, obviously development. We have been in the past a residential developer, predominantly operating since about more than a couple of decades, mostly in Dubai. Just a bit of work in Abu Dhabi. I joined the company about only 3 months back, so we are trying to expand in the UAE to cover Dubai and Abu Dhabi as well, perhaps as well in the wider region. I have myself worked a bit in Saudi Arabia for 3 or 4 years, so I know the market quite well, and we're looking as well to expand geographically and asset-wise.
Thank you, Raja. And Cüneyt, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, thanks, Colin. My name is Cüneyt. I'm General Manager for Services Business in Honeywell Building Technologies, based here in Dubai. I spent 25 plus years of my career buildings controls industry. First in Turkey, in Russia, in Europe, and since 2015, I'm in the Middle East and covering Middle East, Turkey, and Africa region. Obviously, as a company, software-oriented controls company, we are trying to make sure that we are ensuring comfort, secure and energy-efficient buildings. And right now, managing a service team which is servicing our customers across the region. Thank you.
Thanks. And Robert?
Hi there. I'm Dr. Robert Cook, Director of Sustainability in Bureau Happold. Bureau Happold are a global consultancy practice, largely framed around the built environment. I was head of our sustainability division in the Middle East region for 6 years, but moved back to the UK a few years ago, but are still doing a lot of work in the Middle East. And yeah, we're working on sort of leading sustainability projects across the region. Delivered quite a few sort of net zero projects myself in the region, which some of which are built and operational. So looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Robert. I think the first place to start, I mean, the region's very ambitious. It's always very keen to drive its position on the global stage. How does the region perform in terms of the sort of energy efficiency and sustainability of its cities and buildings at the moment? Happy for anyone to tackle that one. It's a pretty open question. Looks like Saeed's jumping.
Yeah, happy to jump in on that. Yeah, I think there's some great market leaders in the region. You know, you've got projects like Masdar that are pushing a number of net zero projects. You've got organisations like MAF that have a net zero carbon statement that they've really put out there as a position, and some really great stuff happening on a number of projects throughout the region as well. So I think you've got definitely the right ingredients of market leaders. Definitely the government's behind the sustainability agenda, and there's lots of initiatives happening at sort of the vision level and top level. I think there's still always work to do. It goes across globally, not just in this region, but to really kind of drive policy and regulation probably more aggressively, I'd say. And it does take time. There are challenges with it to really make sure that you've got the market leaders that are pushing the envelope, but policies and regulations really needed to pull the rest of the market along with it as well. And there's some great examples, some very, very good policy in instances, and I guess it's just making sure that we bring that across the board, across the region, to really bring the whole market up to that level.
And how important has the government been in pushing that? I thought that was an important point that you made there. There's a lot of pull and push factors going on there, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of my sort of theory of change that with anything that change in any industry is that you need your market leaders to demonstrate what's possible and demonstrate what's feasible. A government's not going to put in a policy until they've got that confidence that's in there. So I think that ingredient is there. But I guess to bring 95% of the rest of the market, with you, has to be driven by policy and regulation. I think the best practice, the innovation, the great examples is going to be the market leaders. But the vast chunk of the market needs to be pushed by regulation. That's across the world. So I guess to answer your question, how important is the government's role in it? It's absolutely critical. It drives the market.
So, Robert.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Cüneyt.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me try to add to that. I agree with Saeed. We see that there is really a good push and focus from governments in the region, especially in UAE and in Saudi Arabia. There is long-term programs, energy efficiency programs. There is targets which is set for 2030 and so on. And there is a clear targets of energy reduction, especially when it comes to the buildings. And as a part of that, since 2016, I was part of it in my company. I was, let me say, starting up the energy business here in the region. We have seen that since 2016, the focus is there. And in certain geographies, even this was supported by establishing companies like what we call Super ESCO, which is systematically managing this energy efficiency program, especially around the government buildings. Because there are huge scale sized government buildings built maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And if you look, they are not efficient enough. And maybe even some, waste energy is being spent because the premises are usually overcooled and so on. So these organizations took the challenge which comes with the financing, because typically to do such massive retrofits, especially on the government side, so they introduced the finance programs. ESCO companies developed as a part of this strategy. As I mentioned, us and other control companies, some local companies, they established, they are certified as ESCO companies. And today, in certain geographies, we see that there is a good process of doing what we call energy performance contracts. And these energy performance contracts are very well known, especially in US. There's a very established legislation. in UK, in few of the countries in the same way. So ESCO companies or the end user customers can approach the ESCO companies and they can get a solution for them together with the financing. And I started to see that the ball is really rolling faster and faster every day in the region.
Mm-hmm. And
if I may add one thing as well, Colin, to that, I think there needs to be focus as well on the other side. I mean, while the government is and should be doing more for that, there is as well should be a focus on the end users. End users today think that, or some of them at least, that they would just be saving the environment by adopting green buildings and looking at working with developers who provide energy solutions. But they need to know that they will be as well saving their finances in the process. Not a lot of people are clear about that. I mean, yeah, sometimes the message is passed that you can save on your OPEX, and somebody might look and say, well, instead of paying 5,000 dirham, or let's say 3,000 dirham a month, I'll be paying 2.5 or 2,000 dirham a month. What he needs to realize at the end of the day is that the property value is determined by the, discounting the future stream of your net operating income, whether it's an office, whether it's a residential, whatever that is. And any saving in the OPEX is going to translate in a higher property value at exit. So I don't think a lot of people do realize that. Probably people in real estate, investment, and finance, they do understand that. But the end users and the tenants and everybody alike needs to be aware it's not just saving the environment, it's saving as well their own finances along the way.
Would you say that awareness is growing?
I wouldn't think so from my own personal experience. So when we're trying to explain, we as developers trying to explain to people that, we want to do this and that in terms of energy efficiency, the product we're providing is going to include, smart systems, is going to, the AC system are going to be future-proof, smart technology, and. There is some awareness, but I wouldn't say there is a lot of awareness. And it is going definitely in the right direction. And I think it's the role of the developers and the role of the government and other entities as well to enlighten the people and add, more information being made available to the general public.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on the awareness side, I think it can be improved. And there are certain councils like Dubai Green Council in other countries, like in Qatar, there's a similar in Saudi Arabia. So there are also organizations which is composed of from the experts, which experts come together, and they are working on this, trying to increase the awareness. From the end user side, yes, I agree with Raja. There are some end users which are really aware of it, and they are looking at any aspects of their building in order to reduce the OPEX, but they are also aware that, especially if you talk about the commercial buildings, the energy spent on the HVAC systems, and it's a part of this big portion in this geography, right? We need cooling every other day. It's a big portion, but with some customers, the awareness is not there. And I think as the companies like Honeywell and similar companies, that's what we are trying to do. We are reaching to the customers, and we are explaining, what can be done based on an OPEX model, limited CAPEX model, solutions which can self-fund, etc. And then, they start the lesson and they became aware, and then sometimes it becomes an eye-opener for some of the customers.
Robert, you were trying to join in the discussion there, as you.
Well, I think just to your original question, I think it tends to be the sort of motivations tend to be sort of stop-start and inconsistent, and I suppose it reflects many of the issues in the market across the region. There's been a lot of programs over time. I look at Abu Dhabi, and the programs for sustainability there have been very aggressive at first. at the same time as there was a sort of a boom in Abu Dhabi, when the market sort of stopped, literally stopped in Abu Dhabi when the funding stopped coming through from government. Then the levels ambitions also dropped. So it's unfortunately, historically, I think the sustainability and sort of net zero angle has been exposed to the same market pressures as other things, and it does come down to money, and it comes down to adoption, really. Where the developers that we've seen really sort of carrying this through are the ones sort of probably looking at a much longer life to their development, and perhaps different strategies, particularly ones around hospitality, where they're sort of saying, well, look, who's going to come here in 10 years' time? Who's going to come here in 20 years' time? Sort of more so perhaps than residential or sort of off-plan sales. And then they've committed to a carbon price or pricing in carbon into their development. And I think that's a key factor, because you're then looking at it sort of financially. And when you look at the carbon price now, there's a range of figures, but it's sort of $10 to $20, let's say, per ton of carbon. But actually, the likely price, sort of the projected price in sort of 10 years or so, is $100. So it could soon change the perspective of things when if you're looking at it at $100 a ton, it really changes the economics around whether or not to apply more energy efficiency, whether or not to apply renewables. But there's an interesting thing. The other side of it is the social side, which is sort of picked up there. Is it does need adoption. And if there's no demand from the user, from the occupier for adoption, it's very difficult for people to really sort of put aggressive moves forward. So I mean, you can have a sort of government push. You can be the sort of the market, the sort of price indicators. There still needs to be that adoption. And I was on a talk yesterday about that someone was talking about electric cars. They said, look, I've been in the electric car industry 20 years, and we've been sat there with products that could work. And all of a sudden, in the last 12 months, demand has quadrupled in the UK, for instance, right? Because it's just got to that point where it's as easy to use an electric car as it is an internal combustion engine. The range issue has sort of been solved, as it were, or close to. The price points have got close enough, and all of a sudden it's gone whang. It's like beyond anyone's sort of wildest dreams, and it needs to accelerate very quickly. And I wonder really whether or not you can sort of look the same in the green building industry. There are examples. The technology is all there. And we know how to do it. And I mean, I did the Masdar Eco Villa, I think in 2016 it was built. And we proved to the Abu Dhabi government that we could build it the same price as a standard government offered villa. There was no price margin for all of the energy efficiency elements. The only thing that would add the extra cost is the PV, but they're going to install PV across the network anyway, and therefore there's sort of very limited net actual cost of the PV to the government, given it's a government sort of a project. So you're sort of saying, well, there's no real cost difference, and that was built 5 years ago. It's there. You can go and see it. You can walk around it. It's a lovely villa. It's not just an eco villa. It's one that you'd really like, and at a very high quality of internal environment. But it's still not happened. There's still one sat in Masdar, so which is odd. But so those things need to come together. The government pressure, the price indicators, and the indications of social acceptance and social demand.
What's stopping things like that taking off? I mean, it must be quite frustrating from your side if you come up with a concept that works and it's just not quite taking off. What's the stumbling block?
Again, I think it's largely the inconsistency. I think the region does struggle with the ups and downs of the oil price. I mean, there's a lot of other factors as well, but it always been quite sensitive to and quite sort of, it goes up quick and it goes down quick, and that doesn't lead to the sort of some of the long-term planning, unfortunately, in my view, and that's something I think we don't really know, because we've not seen the same, in my view, not seen the same bubbles in Saudi Arabia. you've got a much more consistent population there. So maybe it'll be a longer, so a more consistent, steadier drive there, and hopefully then that has a positive influence also on Dubai and Abu Dhabi and others. But I think it's largely just that the tap that turns on and off of government funding and of the real estate sort of market pressures. But welcome to hear the other opinions.
Anyone else want to jump in on that point?
Yeah, I think good point, Robin. I think it's a great project, the one you referenced, and I think that's coming back to the point I mentioned earlier. I think that the role that government has is to take these progressions, and the way you cement progress into sort of the mainstream is through policy and regulation. And I think that's maybe a part that there is still some work to do. That these great showcases and examples, and you look at sort of building code, the German building code, for example, which very held as extremely energy efficient. That sort of spun out of the passive house standard, which was sort of an aspirational standard. So people say, right, we want to follow the sort of passive house and really showcase ourselves. But then the role of government is to take that and say, right, okay, it's been proven to be commercially viable, technically viable. That now needs to become policy to bring the mainstream with it, because particularly the construction sector, the building sector, it's a very lack of a better word, a very apathetic sector. It's used to doing things its old ways, won't make changes, just because it's easier. So really, to drive change, even if it makes sense, even if it makes commercial sense, the sector often shies away from it. So to me, and from experience I've had I've come to that belief that really, for us to drive change, it has to be driven through policy and regulation. We do need sort of the grassroots innovators to show what can be done, but then to cement that into sort of the 99% of the sector is really capturing that in policies.
Is the fact that there's a lot of projects have been completed now, and people have had to deal with the sort of the operational cost of these projects, are people a lot more aware of OPEX and ongoing cost and sustainability than they maybe were in the past, when it was very much a build something and what's my ROI and then forget about it?
I'd like to say yes, but I still don't think so. When you look at residential, right, the main sector, what's the driver for someone choosing a residential property? I think it'd be hard pressed to find anyone that says, yeah, I've chosen this house or this apartment because it's energy efficient. It's there you go, we've got one call. but it's location, quality, and as a sector, we've also got to take part of the blame for this. It's not very well communicated. If someone does want to buy an energy efficient or rent an apartment that's more energy efficient, they're looking around the marina, they don't actually know what is where they are going to have a lower OPEX and things. So I think there is a bit of work that needs to happen in terms of transparency of that data. I mean, we worked on a piece of work with the government of Dubai to sort of create effectively energy rating scheme for existing buildings in Dubai, so that they can provide that transparency to the market, because then people can start speaking with their wallet. If this building's rated as a D, this one's an A, that the theory would be, by giving people the information, then that can make the choice, and then that will actually, you'll start to see people driven to sort of operational costs. But at the moment, the data's not there. Even if an office tenant or residential tenant or home buyer or office buyer, they don't have the information to hand to make that informed choice. So choices are being driven through other aspects, location, quality, etc. So yeah, I guess answering your question, is that driving things at the moment? I'd like to say yes, but I'd say probably not. It's driven more through sort of the funding, pressures from funding to drive sustainability, or through policy and regulation, or corporate commitments, much less so from the end user.
How different would that, you're talking there about having buildings rated, how different would that be to say that the sort of the Pearl initiative or LEED ratings and things like that?
Well, the LEED rating, Alabbar rating, Pearl rating, that basically looks at the sort of the built asset, what's gone into the building, all aspects, materials, the waste, etc. What I was talking about there was more just and that can be quite confusing to an end user. What does a gold building mean? What does a silver building mean? because it takes a lot of factors. What I was talking about is more analogous to sort of the EPCs, DECs that exist in the UK and in the EU, where you're rating it purely on its energy consumption per square meter, on its operational consumption, not sort of what's gone into it. Does it have bells and whistles? Does it have technology? Does it have things? You know, that's, you know, the Pearl rating or the LEED rating looks at it as an asset, you know, rates the asset in terms of, you know, what does that asset consist of? This is more around sort of the operational performance. So it gives an end user sort of inaccurate, you know, able to compare like for like in terms of how much money am I going to spend on this. Whereas, you know, a gold rating or silver rating doesn't necessarily tell them, you know, how much they're going to comparatively spend. So it's more around that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to add, you know, look at this from a slightly different angle. We basically are saying the same thing. I mean, today, and I think you touched on this, Colin, you were saying how, you know, you spoke a bit about the building. Are they efficient today? I don't see that the current building today are highly efficient. I mean, there are many reasons for that. I mean, there is an excessive usage of glazing. You tell me which building you come into now and you find the proper building management system and you find you know, smart AC control system in place. You find, I mean, there are some of these, but in the vast majority, it's basic. Everything over there is basic, and there are reasons for that. The UAE is a very highly competitive market, and there are large developers in the market. And the price war that we've been seeing and the payment terms and all of that has, I mean, it has a role in that. Nobody to be blamed. The UAE is an open country. Everybody can come in, can do business. It's an open market. It's not a regulated market in terms of prices and competition, all of that. Though there were some shouts at the time to try to do something of the sort, but it remains to be an open market. So what can developers do to that? One thing that we're doing, at least, and as I said, I joined the company 3 or 4 months back. We were a developer who would be general developers, so we would be you know, competing with everybody else in the market. There are 70,000 unit new supply. We'd be competing with that 70,000 unit. What did we have to do? We had to be very competitive in terms of the material that we're putting, in terms of the energy efficient material, which I have to say wasn't much at the time. Now what we're doing is that we are trying to go into niche market, try to be to work in a specialized market. So instead of competing with 70, 80,000 unit, we are suddenly competing with 1,000 or 2,000 unit. What's the impact on us? Well, we can indulge a bit in terms of the construction cost. Though I have to say that when you want to adopt energy efficient solution, your cost is not supposed to shoot astronomically high, if ever. You can end up as well with 5% increase in cost, 6%, 3%, sometimes a negative cost increase, perhaps, when you you know, plan the whole process from the beginning. So when you specialize as a developer, instead of competing with the overall market, you are in a position to indulge a bit in this sort of solutions, and you can target a certain niche clientele. For us, we're targeting now the millennials and the Generation Z, and these people are very much environmentally conscious. So suddenly, by doing this, I limit my competition. I target a clientele that understands what is energy efficient, what is sustainability, and why am I doing this? And suddenly, I find myself in a much better position to engage into, you know, doing smart construction, energy efficient building. So I think if developers adopt that mentality, and instead of competing with everybody else that is in the market, and pick their niche market, do their homework, study it very well, they are comfortable operating in that market and do it, I think things would improve as well.
We've had a question come through, which I'll ask because I think it's pertinent to what we're discussing now. It says, can the panel share their experience of building codes that reward developers and designers for developing smart, low-carbon buildings? Anyone have any experience there?
Well, I think the challenge is the word reward. So I know, I'm pretty sure it was Dubai Maritime City had in their covenants that if you achieved a higher LEED score, I think it was gold or platinum, that developer could then have an extra 10% of GFA on their agreement. That was a reward. I mean, in Estidama, you've got the Pearl system, which is great, and you've got some examples of 5 Pearl buildings, and which is very, very strenuous. But there's no reward, and so it's interesting. It goes back to that point. It's like, does someone recognise the value? So either that there's a carbon price or a recognised real estate value addition to that, and so it is. I think I would have sort of said in the past there's not a huge amount of market research done, and that's, I suppose, if developers are working with a general, as you're sort of saying there, if you're competing against just anyone in the general market, then you've got overall market sentiment. But if you're going in at a niche level, then you're more focused, and that's where you've got the opportunities. But yeah, I mean, so I don't know if I don't know of any others that give, as it were, sort of financial reward or an easier way through the processes or whatever. I think the only real thing I'd sort of say is that when we work with clients when we use sort of sustainability rating systems, or we come up with something bespoke, is really the focus is quality. So, we worked on Lootah Abu Dhabi, and air tightness was absolutely critical. Now, obviously, that's really important from an energy efficiency perspective, but it's also vitally important for a high quality internal environment for the people and the precious art. So it becomes a really important thing. Now, I would prefer to have an office or residential with high quality of envelope, and you see mold issues in the region because of moist air ingress into facades and things like that, and it creates a really poor quality space. Now, an energy efficient facade which is highly insulated and good air tightness will deliver much better thermal comfort and internal environmental quality. So I think I see that those systems tend to offer better quality. They often include mechanisms for on-site, on construction reviews and monitoring of contractors and monitoring of quality. And it gives you a mechanism as a client to say, Mr. Contractor, you have not delivered to the right quality. We will not pay you, or you will make remediation. So I'd say really use those systems do offer value in terms of providing better quality product, which then you can try and recognise.
Anyone else have any point to add on to that one?
Yeah, I'll maybe just add, as to giving sort of examples from the question. I think definitely seen it sort of at the larger scale, the master plan scale, or sort of larger development scale. We were working on a scheme in Mauritius where, based on providing sort of smart infrastructure or smart infrastructure solutions, the developer was eligible for sort of tax breaks from that, and the logic being is that through sort of smart infrastructure, efficient infrastructure, it creates a less of a sort of burden on the government on sort of electricity and on water supply, etc. So they've got a lower sort of infrastructure spend. So in essence, it's passing that saving or a portion of that saving onto the developer to create that incentive. So I think I gave a good example, a scheme that worked in Dubai. But I guess from a macroeconomic perspective, if we're able to translate what the saving is at a governmental level through reduced infrastructure, that's one of the biggest savings you're getting from sustainable developments, sustainable buildings and things. It's actually the reduced or avoided infrastructure spend that's put into it. So we probably as an industry look at sort of more creative ways at a macroeconomic level of translating those savings to incentivize developers to make those choices as well.
Saeed, I'm not sure what happened there, but your camera's gone off. If you may have touched the button by accident, I'm not sure. We had another question come through, which follows on a little bit from what Robert was talking about with things like facades and additional systems that can help improve efficiency. The question is, for design and build projects, most of the lead and sustainability points of the project are drowned out. I think it means is basically taken out by value engineering. How such projects can be monitored? Is that something you've experienced, Robert?
I wouldn't use the word value engineering, but I would use the word cost cutting. I mean, I think a contractor can always propose to the client, shared savings and things like that, and then the client needs to. I mean, it is really important to understand what is value, what is valuable, and if value isn't recognised of any of these systems, then it's a key problem. I mean, I'd kind of say, I remember one project we did, which I think is finished now. It's Sterling Towers with Omnia in Business Bay, and I remember I was involved in the pre-concept design. And we got the passive design, and really we did some amazing work around passive design. And unfortunately, we didn't get employed after that because they said, "Well, you've done it all now; it's fine." And it didn't cost them any money because they shielded off the east and west facades. It's very much south and north facing. They've got overhangs on the south. It meant they could save money on the glass because they didn't need high G value glass because they've got the shading from the balconies. And so many simple things in there that would mean that building is significantly more energy efficient than so comparative, say, they hadn't done that passive design. So it's interesting that couldn't be value engineered out unless they were going to start, significantly shifting stuff. So it's really important from a sustainable design perspective is get things in that can't be value engineered out, and that doesn't mean sort of sew them in a negative way. It means make sure they're so incumbent to the design, important to the design that they stay in, that they are really demonstrating value. I think if you've got add-ons and if the value of those add-ons isn't clear, then you're at risk of them dropping away. So it's important to get the sort of client buy-in to value and to recognise value.
I think as well, if I may add, sorry, Colin, if I may add something. I think as well this has to do, because I think the question is about design and build. And I think that goes back to the point to which project you give the contractor on a design and build. And you need to be very careful, whether it's owners, whether it's developers, that not to give design build projects for contractor when the project is a residential, or it's an office, or it's a hotel with specific attributes. I would give a design build for a contractor whenever I'm building a hospital, whenever I'm building an industrial plant, because the specs are so defined, everything is well laid out, it's highly regulated. So there is not a lot of room for the contractor to play games. But when you do that with a residential building or an office building, you are asking for trouble, because not only the sustainability element go away, not only the energy efficient, a lot of other things are going to go away. And we as developers see that all the time, and we're very careful that the only time we give something in a design build is, as I said, industrial, hospital, power plant, whatever, something very well defined, very specific. Otherwise, we don't do that. So I think part of the problem lies into being careful what to assign or award on a design and build or just as a construction.
Yeah, and Colin, if I may add as well, Robert mentioned whether it's a value engineering or cost cutting. We see those kind of things happening in some constructions. And as a system supplier and a service company, later on during the building's life cycle time, we do realize these challenges, which is coming from the construction side. And then, obviously, when the building is live, it becomes more difficult to fix certain things, but it's not also impossible. And we are trying to help our customers to come over these challenges in terms of, first of all, the main thing what we are trying to do is using the existing data, which they have with the building management system. We are trying to show them what is the comfort performance, energy performance, maintenance performance of the building. And especially for customers who have a big portfolio, it becomes very important because they can benchmark the buildings. And based on this benchmark, they can understand in which buildings they spend more energy and the comfort performance is lower compared to the others. And the focus can be on trying to create efficiency and achieve sustainability on those buildings. So I think BMS and the data, we have been saying for some time, right? Data is the new oil. So crunching the data, analyzing the data, doing analytics, there are different techniques, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. Obviously, there's a significant possibility to improve the energy efficiency in the buildings and help customers to achieve their sustainability targets, objectives.
Yeah, I think that moves us to an interesting another area is that we've obviously had an awful lot of building work go on in the region over the last decade, 2 decades. How much of that stock needs to be looking at, say, retrofit, upgrade, improving its efficiency? Is there much work to be done there?
Should I go or Robert?
I think Saeed was trying to come in. I'm not sure.
Yeah, please, Saeed.
Yeah. No, I think this is a big challenge everywhere. As the existing stock, not just here. The buildings that have been built, the past 10 years, 50 years, whatever it is, aren't you can say fit for or not going to achieve sort of what we're looking to achieve from decarbonisation to the built environment targets. So this is a challenge across Europe, North America, and Middle East as well. And it's a big challenge because connecting existing stock is not easy from a financial perspective, and also an existing building is where people live, work, and play. We can't. It's very difficult to kind of go in and disrupt too much. So I think it's a big challenge everywhere to tackle, but it creates opportunities because from a economic perspective, a lot of these kind of retrofits being done, very, very positive feedback with IRRs of over 30% in some cases. So with the right tools and the right investment, there's a big opportunity there as well.
Yeah, if I may add, Colin, I believe that there is a great opportunity there. And if you look to the energy saving targets which government set for certain countries, you can correlate with that as well. But again, as a BMS and a ESCO company, from the experience, I can easily say you that we have executed and we are also executing energy performance contracts, which generates 35, close to 40% energy savings. This is really substantial. And the other thing is that, again, I will come to using the data because I believe that it's a good example. We talked about the rating, right? We have some customers who are really likes innovative technologies. So in a very smart building, which is accepted to be smart, LEED certified building, we deployed IoT-based, machine learning-based, closed-loop set point optimization solution, which we call as Forge Energy Optimization. So in a very, let me say, energy efficient building, we managed to save 8 to 10% savings. This is also substantial. And here, you are not doing any retrofit, right? You are using the data which you have from the existing BMS system, and then you are applying basically a IoT solution. And the goodness of this solution is that it can be deployed on any BMS system. So here we are talking about a solution which is brand and vendor, software and hardware agnostic. I believe that, and that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to reach out to the customers, to the end users, to educate and how we can work together with them and with some small, let me say, investments generate good amount of savings. And then the savings you generate can be used to invest for further retrofits, which can generate additional savings.
Raja, as a developer, do you sit on any assets that you operate?
You mean we as a developer, do we have operating assets? Yes, we do. We do have, a few existing assets that have been there for around 15 and 20 years. And actually, this morning, we were looking at how efficient these assets are. And I can tell you, we're having an OPEX ratio or an OPEX margin of about 40 to 50%. So 50% of our lease rental return is being eaten up by operating expenses, a large majority of which is mostly utilities, electricity and AC costs. These are rented properties. And we were exactly looking this morning to see whether there is anything we can do. Some of these properties are beyond beyond repair or beyond improvement. These are 15, 20 years old, but some of them, they can benefit from something. I mean, you can work a bit on the, perhaps on the glazing of the building, introducing some, dark films on the glass, doing something of the sort, trying to reduce the energy bill. You can perhaps invest in a more sophisticated AC system. So we are looking at things that we can actually do, but the issue is it's difficult, and I'm telling you from a practical perspective for old buildings. Some might argue that no, there are always things that can be done, and this is correct actually, and we're looking quite hard into that because we have an issue with some of those existing buildings, and we have to do something about it. We are forced actually to do something about it. It's not really by choice. A property that is 50%, of your rental return is going into OPEX, you cannot sustain that property, so you have to do something about it.
And what sort of options do you look at? Do you look at bringing in financing or do you do that just off your own equity?
No, for the time being, it's out of our own equity. It's us doing some investment, doing some capex investment, trying to improve the energy efficiency of those buildings. We're not there at the stage where we can go get financing for that. We could explore that in the future, but for the time being, we're seeing what we can do, something within our hand reach, our own equity, to do something and improve those buildings.
Okay. And Robert, the existing, you often look at things like master plan developments and urban schemes. Is there much in the way of sort of looking at large scale areas for redevelopment and trying improving efficiency in anything that you've dealt with?
Yeah, certainly. I think there's a couple of things at play here. One is, I think the industry has to realise that what they've deemed as an asset and they might value as an asset is becoming more and more of a liability, and becomes a liability over time. And that just on the operational costs, as you were sort of saying, and then the maintenance, but also climate resilience, and then obviously social change and expectation, changing in expectation. So I think, as I was sort of saying before, at times the change in mindset between whether or not someone would buy an electric car or not, have an electric car has changed very rapidly in people's heads in a very short time. And I think that there isn't the transparency in terms of performance of buildings. But for instance, if that came in, if the for instance, the Dubai government did release those numbers or obtain and release those numbers, I think that would, there would be a major shock, and you might have a major change very rapidly. So it probably has to be done quite carefully. In terms of master planning, we're working on the regeneration of the historic district in Jeddah, and yeah, I mean, we've got the aspirations of being as sort of sustainable as possible, but you're working with existing real estate. We're also in that case sort of working with buildings which are UNESCO World Heritage sort of status as well. So there's quite a lot of challenges. I mean, those are buildings without really. They've got in-window split sort of AC systems and things like that, which are, you try and sort of design out. The older buildings don't really have the service space for, even for servicing. I know of stores back in the day of towers built in Dubai, in the boom, which, there's very limited access to, to sort of, utility areas to service risers and things like that. In fact, no access to some of the sort of service risers. So a major headache for existing owners to sort of say, well, how can I even do this? I can't even get access to stuff. Personally, I think just going back to the sort of comments of before, it's all about, I mean, we talk about design and build and things and ownership. We have to take an integrated approach, and the procurement model must take an integrated approach. Everyone must buy into the requirements. I'm intrigued because I've often said that actually many of the more sustainable buildings in the region have been done by design and build, and I don't really know why that is. I mean, Arena headquarters, I did the design for, and Saeed's company, I worked on the contractor side as design and build contractor. And I'm pretty sure that the contractor actually delivered better performance than was required from the design side. I think that at the end of the day, that they actually exceeded the design aspirations. And so, yeah, what was kind of the rationale behind that? But there needs to be a sort of a shared buy-in. Personally, I've seen, I believe that certainly when we're doing infrastructure schemes, like the master plan, is kind of looking at design, build, finance, operate. So it is that ESCO model, sort of saying, well, actually, these are the requirements we achieve you to hit, and you're in it for the long haul, or certainly over a period. And getting asset developers or asset owners or contractors into that same mindset is the way of, in the procurement, making sure that they're responsible in some way for the sort of the operations, and at least in the sort of first few years. So there's can you put into the contract bonuses and whatever based on actual performance. And I think that's really important to look at how we contract, how you write those sort of client requirements documents in order to actually deliver to sort of what we call close the design loop, close the design gap, and in between what design says and what actually happens in the Foreman. But yeah, I
mean, that integrated approach is quite a difficult thing to strive for in some cases. How hopefully you that happening in the future? I think the environment's certainly rising up the agenda, so I would guess that the likelihood is improving, but still possibly challenging.
Yeah, well, where a master developer has a long-term buy-in to that development, we were talking about, for instance, some of the giga projects in Saudi Arabia as an example, but the Masdar is the same. Then it's in their interest to do so. So they, if you can, you have to work really from the bottom up, right from the controls in the building, which is vitally important and must not be ignored, to thinking about people behavior and how you influence people behavior, all the way up to the construction and whatever, and all that process, because you can reduce your infrastructure capital costs, and they can lead to major savings. And if you have to look at it as a whole, and you have to think, how am I going to incentivize that? So how will I bill for services? Will it just be a flat utility charge or service charge? Will it be per unit? What can I charge, and that kind of thing? You kind of, I think, as any developer really now should be looking at that all the way through and sort of thinking about it, and how do I incentivize the right behaviors? And to a certain extent, ideally, building a better relationship with that end user as well. So looking at it not just as a transactional process of, well, I'm going to charge them loads of money, because that doesn't work so well. They're not going to stick with you very long. So it's actually working it through together. And I think that's where the positive side. So I've seen that on the giga projects from a master plan level. I've seen that with the likes of Masdar. It's whether or not that can sort of proliferate more through the whole industry, I think, is a question for me.
We've had another question, which is, should property charges and property taxes, brackets, in countries that have those taxes, be lower if the building operating costs are lower and more efficient than existing buildings? Does anyone have any thoughts on that, regulation and taxation?
Yeah, I think this kind of relates to the example that I gave of an infrastructure scale scheme where there's a reduced a tax incentive for providing efficient infrastructure, because it provides a cost saving to the government. So I think in instances where a developer is going above and beyond to install more efficient systems that does provide a cost saving to the government, then yeah, by all means, it's something that's worth exploring.
Any other comments on taxation and regulation, or? No. We're slowly
I just think you've got to find a balance between carrot and stick. So always try, I think there's got to be positive incentivization. I think as much as a sort of as a taxation. So.
Mm-hmm. We've got 5 minutes to go. We've had quite a wide-ranging topic there, and a lot of things discussed. Are there any things that any of you guys would like to raise or bring into the discussion?
Well, I mean, what I may say is we talked about the awareness. The awareness is increasing, but I would like to, obviously, there is two aspects. First of all, it's important while constructing new buildings, applying the latest technology, the right controls to make sure that the buildings are energy efficient. And it helps customers and users to achieve their sustainability goals. And then we have the buildings which are done in the past, 10 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old. And I believe the real opportunity for energy efficiency is with these buildings. If any customer, building owner, facility manager, if they are struggling with high energy bills, definitely they can get the support from the market. I believe that there's a quite mature ESCO market in UAE and in Saudi Arabia at the moment. And they can get the consultancy, and there are companies out there who's ready to help and support. And with some investments, there can be really important savings. As I mentioned earlier, some of them can be achieved just by without doing a big capex investment, just using some software technologies, platforms, which will as an OPEX, and it will help you to reduce from your OPEX. And obviously the savings is more than what you're investing. So it becomes a self-funding. So there are different techniques out there which can be implemented. I really encourage everyone to think from that perspective and ask for help.
Yeah, I mean that's quite an achievable target. Are there any other things that the other panelists would say that will happen over the next couple of years? In terms of the market,
I just flagged that there needs to be a major step change. So, the ambitions that sort of set before us are great, and I think the government has sort of said the right things. But then there really does need to be a major step change. And that's the thing here. I think it's root and branch. I think it's all the way from, you need to understand things like controls. You must get your head into behaviour and people, all the way up to sort of passive design and the fundamentals of infrastructure. There's a real thinking needed all the way through the chain. But we must create step change, not marginal improvements with 5%, 10% better here. We must do significantly better and need to adopt that step change and to find a way to do that. Personally, I feel that you need to make sure there's a lifestyle focus. Behavior is so important. Getting the purchaser, the operator to buy into it. So design, it's got to be green, but it's really got to be attractive to the user, and you must sort of tie in that sort of lifestyle, sort of social focus and sort of create a community that wants to change and be part of that change. But it's vital that we shift very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely, Robert. I mean, I think I agree with that. And one thing to add, I mean, we all saw during the pandemic what happened when the industries were shut down and the economy was literally shut down. We were seeing clearer water. If you look at the satellite images that all of us saw, they were phenomenal. So really, the effect that is happening today of where we are is really has been shown to be very significant. The effect that is coming from the cars, from the buildings, from the industries and everything else. And I think the government should leverage on that. I mean, these images still on everybody's mind, that what happens when you shut down the economy. Okay, what happens if you can reduce the energy emission by 20-30%? I mean, is there a simulation that could show what's the impact of that's going to be on the environment? Perhaps this needs to be taken into consideration, shown by the government to end users, to the general public, and say, further from what you've seen has happened during the pandemic because of the shutdown, this is what's going to happen, and these are the benefits that will happen if we do so and so and so. So again, I mean, that was the point I said from the beginning, that in addition to what all the governments are doing, it has to come from the end user. And the end user has to come to me as a developer and tell me, what do you have as a green solution for me? Show me what you have. I'm looking for this, so and so and so. And this is the type of product I want, and what can you provide me with? And I think that would be the moment where we will all be in a much, much better shape.
Thank you. And Saeed, would you like to, any last comments? We're just closing out of time now.
Yeah, no, I think I definitely echo what Rob said. It's to achieve what the targets have been set by the Paris Agreement, by the whole decarbonisation agenda. It's not an incremental change. I think we've had 15 years of incremental change and learning, but it needs to be a step change, a radical change of going from where we are to decarbonise built environment, which needs to start today. I mean, we're saying that by 2030, all new buildings have to be net zero carbon. Looking that it's about basically a 5 to 6 year build cycle for a new building. Basically, anything that we design 2-3 years from now needs to be done at a net zero point. Are we there? Not at the moment. We're close to there. It's still some way to go. So yeah, I think coming to my earlier point, it's policies and regulations need to start making step changes. And this is not just the region, but I think globally, for us to get to where we need to go. And I think it needs to be that severe a push, and the industry will figure it out. We've got some great minds in this sort of built environment design construction fields, that you set them that challenge that this is what needs to happen. There's no getting out of it. People will find solutions. They'll find solutions to do it cost effectively. The same way that solar panels have dropped in price 90-95% over the last 10-11 years. So there'll be solutions to this when it's done at scale. So yeah, I'd echo that from what Rob said. So that's all from me.
Okay, thank you, Saeed, and you did very well there. That leads us into the next session, which is on with my colleague Jennifer Aguinaldo, which is about the energy transition, and talking about things like solar power, where there has been a significant amount of change over the last few years. So I think I'd just like to finish up and say thank you everybody for tuning in and listening, and then obviously thank you to all the panelists. It's been very interesting and insightful to hear all your thoughts on the subject, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Colin.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Our pleasure.